Hello everyone, welcome to the Concern Podcast where we unpack political, social, economic and cultural stories shaping our world. I am Emmanuel Taban. Now, there appears to be a very big confusion within the government of South Sudan, within the SSPDF or the South Sudan People's Defense Forces. There appears to be no one focal point of communication or a point where the public can go to, rely on and trust when it comes to issues of information delivery. In the last few days, we've had lots of information coming out from different people. We've had information coming out from the CDF, the Chief of Defense Forces, Dr. Paul Nang. We had information coming out from the Army spokesperson, that is Brigadier Lul Roy Kong. We have information coming out from Aten Garang Alier. We have information coming out from orders being given by the commander of the Agulek forces, that is Johnson Olony. We had other information yesterday coming out from the government spokesperson and the Minister of Information, Communication, Technology and Postal Services, Atenia Wake Aten. And that makes me ask you lots of questions. Who is in charge? Who is in charge of communication when it comes to issues that are prominent that South Sudanese needs to rely on? Who is in charge? A few days ago, the Chief of Defense Forces went to Jonglei State and addressed some forces and told them that they are heading to war. Literally, he said that, and that they only need 7 days to wipe out the SPLA-IO forces. And that information was confirmed by Johnson Olony, who is a leader of the Agulek forces, but also whose forces are integrated into the SSPDF, the South Sudanese People's Defense Forces, who is working together with the government of Salva Kiir Mayardit and under the commandership of President Salva Kiir Mayardit. He came out and gave orders that they are heading towards war, and when they go to war, the forces under the SSPDF should not spare anyone, not even the elderly or livestock. And someone could easily go to an extent even children or women and other civilians. And that same communication was reaffirmed by the Army spokesperson, the SSPDF Army spokesperson and Director of Media, Brigadier Lul Roy Kong, when he came out and released a statement letter that contained almost 5 warnings given to specific people in those IO-occupied areas. One, he said that if you are a civilian who lives in those places, you should evacuate or leave that place before the operation start. If you are a humanitarian worker who works there, you're given only 48 hours to leave that area. And that if you are of SPLA-IO and you don't have any interest of fighting the SSPDF, you should hand over your rifles to the government, any nearest government garrison. And also that if you are a member of the White Army and that you're not interested in fighting the government as well, you should evacuate. And that anyone found loitering in those areas would be considered an immediate target. That was an information that was given by the Army spokesperson. And when an Army spokesperson speaks, he speaks on behalf of the army of the country. He speaks on the behalf of the SSPDF CDF, that is the commander of defense, the Chief of Defense Forces. And when the Chief of Defense Forces speaks, he speaks under responsibility given to him by the Commander-in-Chief, and that is none other than President Salva Kiir Mayardit. That is how it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, the confusion came yesterday when the Minister of Information, Communication, Technology and Postal Services and the government spokesperson, Atena Wegatin, made a press conference at the ministry headquarters. And what he said was contradictory. he contradicted every statement issued by the previous individuals. He said, one of the things he did was that he distanced the government from the statement issued by Johnson Olony, which he said that on reaching the battleground, the forces should not spare anyone, not even the elderly or their livestock. And the Atene Work Atene say the responsibility of the South Sudan Defense Forces is to protect people and their property and to follow the constitution. Therefore, the government of South Sudan is distancing itself from the statement made by Johnson Olony. In other words, Johnson Olony was left in the cold by himself. The government tried to distance himself from the statement, saying, no, these are statements of Johnson Olony, and they don't in any way belong to the government of South Sudan. Olony is just an individual who is not even a member of the SSPDF, but his forces just got integrated into the SSPDF. So he is speaking that on his own behalf. That is how Atene distanced himself. And second of all, Atene also debunked the orders given by the spokesperson of the army spokesperson, Brigadier Lulrai, who said that the civilians should evacuate and that any civilian found loitering in those areas would be an immediate target. And Atene Weng said there's no any orders given by the government of South Sudan for civilians to evacuate. In fact, I would recommend you to go to the South Sudan Ministry of Information, Communication, Technology and Postal Services page, and you can watch the press conference by Atene Weng Atene. He said that those statements are not of the government of South Sudan. But another question here, what is the difference between the government of South Sudan and the SSPDF, or the army of South Sudan? Who is in charge of these two? The person in charge of the government of South Sudan is the president of South Sudan, and the commander-in-chief of the South Sudan People's Defense Forces is the president of South Sudan. So where is all this confusion coming from? I will address this at the very end of this video. As if it is not enough, Atene Weng came out also and said he convinced the public, tried to cool down tempers and panic, and said the government is not in any war. The country is not heading even to war. There is no war in the country. And he said that what is happening right now in the northern parts of the country, the government is just, the SSPDF is just trying to prevent the SPLIO from advancing to Juba. That is how he has just tried to minimize that statement. He tried to cool down temperatures by doing that. And that also contradicts the statement made by the CDF and the statement issued by some of the military personnel which actually confirms that the country is heading to war. Atene distanced the government from all those remarks made by those individuals. But here's the thing. If you want to understand this confusion, there's actually no confusion. The statement issued by those generals are true. And there is possibility that this statement could have come from above, from the commander-in-chief. But the difference here is that Atene Weng Atene is a politician. Paul Nang, Lulrai, Johnson Olony, Garang Atene, these are military men. And military personnel speak things as they are. They don't politicize it. Atene Weng is a politician. Politicians don't come out and speak things boldly. And Atene Weng Atene, being the government spokesperson and the Minister of Information, his duty is to create that kind of relationship between the public and the government. And therefore, if there is anything that he senses that will cause panic and raise temperatures in the country, he looks for ways on how to cool down temperatures. That is the role of the government spokesperson. So by coming out and saying, oh, there is no war in the country, what is happening is just that the SSPDF is trying to prevent. He is trying to lower down the temperatures in the country and just cool down everything and make it look like it's a simple thing and doesn't make it look like a big issue. That is how politicians do their things. In other words, whereas military men, what they do is they communicate things as they are, point blank. So, the statement by Athene that there is no war, that the government is distancing itself from the statement of Bologna, and that no civilians are asked to evacuate, is actually not true. What he's just doing is he's doing his role. That is what public relations is supposed to act. He's just trying to cool down temperatures. He's not trying to make people panic and that. But in actual sense, the reality of what is happening is communicated by the military. Brigadier Lulrai is a spokesperson of the army, not the spokesperson of the government. These are two different things. When it comes to things and policies and decisions of the government, of the executive, of the country, Athene becomes responsible. But anything to do with the army spokesperson does it. So this is the two differences. So Athene is not the spokesperson of the two. He is the spokesperson of the government of South Sudan. And the government of South Sudan is mainly, we're talking about the executive, and that is it. When we want to know things about the army, then that's when Brigadier Rule comes in, the army spokesperson. Therefore, what I'm saying is that Athene is just playing his politics. He is doing his role as a government spokesperson. You know how journalists do their job. Public relation is very important. Wants to create the credibility between the government and the public. And that's how exactly they do it. So, in other words, Athene was just playing his role. But the actual thing is that the things communicated by the army generals are the things on the ground and the reality. Before we close today's episode, here's a quick message from our sponsor, Wani.co. If you've been planning to build a website, but the cost has been holding you back, Wani.co makes it affordable and stress-free this time around. Whether you are an individual, a non-profit organization, or a business, Wani.co designs professional websites starting from as cheap as $250. Individuals can actually launch with a starter website of up to 7 pages and a free email, or choose an advanced option with unlimited pages, a professional portfolio, and branding support. For non-profit organizations, they can select flexible packages from basic websites to premium solutions with e-commerce features and ongoing support. And for business companies, One.co delivers company-ready website with hosting, staff training, and multi-link options and online stores. And the best part of it is actually that you can build your dream website within your budget. Wani.co is an affordable, accessible, and professional partner. And to get started, you can actually visit Wani.co or email them at info@wani.co, or you can get in touch with them through their WhatsApp number at +1 226 504 3322. Wani.co, proudly affiliated with Jobs to Apply. And if you're wondering of what I'm talking about, here are some samples of website created by Wani.co. You can see them right here.